Welcome to Tech Disruptions, deep dives into the technologies reshaping industries, from AI to quantum to biotech. Let's get into it.
So imagine this. You're casually chatting with your phone's super smart AI assistant, maybe asking it to summarize a quick email or whip up a draft for you. Harmless, right?
Harmless to your cognitive load, perhaps, but according to a new report, it could be devastating for your phone's battery. That means 13% of a flagship iPhone's charge gone for just 1,000 tokens.
13%? For what? Like a couple of paragraphs? For many users, that would not even be enough to get through a morning coffee. What exactly are these tech giants trying to sell consumers?
They're trying to sell consumers a vision of edge AI, where all this incredible intelligence lives on your device. But the reality, according to Cornerstone Communications, is that the physics simply doesn't add up, and the financial incentives behind this push are far more cynical than they appear.
Okay, let's unpack that cynicism. Because the marketing around edge AI running directly on your phone or laptop, it's all about privacy, right? Your data stays on your device, low latency, personalized AI. Sounds great.
It sounds fantastic, and those benefits are real in theory. Keeping data local does enhance privacy, and on-device processing is faster than round-tripping to the cloud. But framing it as an altruistic gift to the consumer completely misses the real story.
Which is?
Money. Pure and simple. This pivot to edge AI is a multi-billion-dollar cost-shifting maneuver.
Cost shifting from whom to whom?
From big tech, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, to you, the consumer. To understand why, you have to look at the staggering cost of running AI in the cloud.
The cloud, where many users interact with AI today, through services like ChatGPT or various online assistants.
Exactly. And that's where the capital expenditure explosion comes in. The Cornerstone report, corroborated by financial filings, shows that these major tech companies spent over $380 billion on AI infrastructure in 2025 alone.
Just 2025? $380 billion? That's an astronomical figure.
It is, and it's a massive acceleration. Back in 2022, their combined capital expenditure was about $162 billion. It more than doubled in just 3 years. This isn't just about building new data centers. It's about acquiring colossal numbers of NVIDIA GPUs and, critically, securing the power grid infrastructure to run them.
So these companies are essentially building an entirely new, incredibly expensive, electricity-hungry infrastructure just to handle AI requests in the cloud.
Precisely. This indicates an energy crisis at the data center level. Serving a single ChatGPT query, for instance, consumes roughly 10 times the electricity of a standard Google search. When you multiply that by billions of users and trillions of queries, you start hitting municipal grid limits. The report even notes that in 2024 and 2025, some of these firms were investing in nuclear power plants just to secure enough electricity.
Wait, nuclear power plants just to run their AI models? That's not a small footnote, that's a headline.
It underscores the scale of the problem. The current business model for generative AI is fundamentally unprofitable at scale if these tech giants have to keep footing the electricity bill for every single prompt generated by billions of users.
So the edge AI push isn't about giving consumers a better experience, it's about getting out of that electricity bill themselves.
That's the ultimate cost-shifting maneuver. By shifting the computational burden of LLM inference from their server farms, their infrastructure, their electricity costs, to the neural processing unit, or NPU, on your smartphone or PC, they achieve a massive financial victory. They offload those electricity costs directly onto the consumer.
This implies that when a user utilizes cloud AI, Microsoft or Google covers the power costs. However, when edge AI is used on a device, that device's battery bears the cost, meaning the user ultimately pays when plugging it into the wall.
That's the practical implication. Silicon Valley isn't giving you a personal AI. They are making you subsidize their server costs. The industry is banking on this transition, with projections from IDC suggesting Gen AI smartphones will account for 70% of the total market by 2028. That's 912 million units sold annually. AI PCs are projected to hit 205 million units. They want a future where your device is their outsourced data center.
It's like they're building a network of miniature, personal servers, but you're paying for the power and maintenance.
And this is where the cold, hard physics kicks in, because hardware does not care about software hype or financial maneuvering.
That shocking 13% figure was mentioned right at the top. Let's delve into that. What does 1,000 tokens really mean in practical terms, and why does it drain so much?
The Cornerstone Communications report conducted real-world testing. They found that generating just 1,000 tokens locally can consume up to 13% of a flagship phone's total battery charge. To contextualize that, 1,000 tokens is roughly 750 words.
750 words? That's not a novel. That's like 2 well-developed paragraphs, maybe a summary of a short article.
Precisely. It's the equivalent of generating a couple of email drafts, summarizing a moderately long PDF, or transcribing and summarizing a 15-minute morning meeting, not an intensive all-day workload for an AI.
So if a user attempts to utilize a phone's AI assistant the way the marketing materials suggest, as a constant companion that reads screens, summarizes notifications, drafts messages, and edits photos, that phone could be dead before lunch.
That's the report's conclusion. It would be entirely depleted before a late lunch. This isn't just about inconvenient recharging. It's about making the device fundamentally unusable for its core purpose as a communication tool.
So why does it happen? Where does all that energy go? This isn't a huge server farm, it's a tiny chip in a user's pocket.
It comes down to the physical constraints of silicon and energy storage. First, running an LLM requires moving massive amounts of data from the device's RAM to the NPU or GPU. This constant shuttling of data is highly energy intensive. Think of it like trying to move a library full of books across town, one book at a time, very quickly. That's a lot of trips, a lot of fuel.
So it's not just the computation, it's the data transfer itself.
Exactly. And then there's the nature of the power draw. Real-world benchmarking shows that local inference creates massive, bursty power spikes. While an Apple M4 or a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip is highly efficient at rest, spooling up that NPU to generate tokens draws intense peak wattage. It's like flooring the accelerator in your car for short, intense bursts. That consumes a lot of gas very quickly.
And phones don't have fans like laptops or desktops, right? So where does all that heat go?
They don't. And that leads to the third major issue, thermal throttling. When an NPU draws high power for AI inference, it generates rapid heat. Benchmarking data indicates that flagship phones lose nearly half their token generation throughput within just 2 iterations of a prompt due to thermal throttling.
Half their speed after just 2 prompts?
Yes. In some Android devices, the operating system even enforces a hard frequency floor that terminates the AI inference entirely to prevent the phone from literally melting or damaging its internal components.
So the phone protects itself by just shutting down the very feature it's supposed to be highlighting. That's the reality. The Cornerstone Communications report offers a really useful historical analogy for this. It says that in the 2000s, early mobile tech was constrained by processing power. The chips were too slow. Then in the 2010s, the smartphone era hit a wall with bandwidth. We couldn't stream high-quality video until 4G and 5G networks caught up.
And now?
Now, in the 2020s, the edge AI era has slammed into the battery wall. The processing power and bandwidth exist. However, the energy density to sustain these massive AI workloads on a mobile device is fundamentally lacking.
So, considering that 13% for a meeting summary, would a user trade 13% of a phone's battery to have an AI write a 3-paragraph email that still requires proofreading?
For 99% of consumers, the answer is a resounding no. And it highlights the absurdity of what's being offered versus what's actually being sacrificed. There's also the idle tax to consider. It's not just active generation that kills the battery. Keeping the model loaded in the device's memory, or RAM, creates a constant power draw. It prevents the phone from entering deep sleep states, leading to what's called phantom drain. So even if you're not actively using the AI, it's still eating your battery in your pocket.
So, if the tech companies know this, if they're seeing these thermal throttles and massive battery drains in their labs, how are they still marketing this as the future?
That's where the marketing sleight of hand comes in. If you watch any of the keynotes for the latest AI-enabled devices, you'll see endless demonstrations of photo generation, live translation, text summarization, all these impressive AI capabilities.
But what you don't see?
What you absolutely will not see are battery life estimates that factor in heavy AI usage. Historically, Apple and Samsung have boasted about all-day battery life or up to 20 hours of video playback. But there is no metric for up to 4 hours of AI token generation. The industry is conspicuously omitting the energy cost of their flagship features.
It's like selling a sports car and only talking about its top speed, never mentioning the fuel economy or the price of premium gas.
Exactly. And this points to a massive, quantifiable disconnect between what Silicon Valley is building and what everyday consumers actually want. Decades of survey data confirm that battery life is the undisputed priority for consumers. Numerous surveys consistently show that a significant majority of consumers prioritize longer battery life as their primary reason for upgrading.
That's a huge majority. So, what about AI features? Where do they rank?
In stark contrast, consumer enthusiasm for AI is remarkably low. Surveys indicate that only a small percentage of consumers consider AI features a motivating factor for upgrading their device, with many stating that AI on phones is not useful and that they would prefer fewer additions if it compromises basic functionality.
So, the feature they're pushing hardest is the one consumers care least about. And not only that, it actively detracts from the feature consumers care about most. This appears to be a recipe for disaster.
It sets up what the Cornerstone report calls a catastrophic collision course for the tech industry, leading to a phenomenon known as feature abandonment.
Feature abandonment? What does that look like in practice?
It goes like this. A consumer buys a new phone, perhaps drawn by promises of better cameras or a faster chip. This phone comes loaded with background AI processes. The user might activate the heavily marketed AI assistant, try it out. The phone's battery plummets, dying at 1 p.m. The consumer, who values battery life above all else, then immediately searches for a way to turn those AI features off. So the NPU, the specialized AI chip they spent billions developing and integrating, becomes dead silicon, just a useless chunk of hardware taking up valuable space on the motherboard.
Precisely. If users systematically disable on-device AI to save battery, the tech industry's entire $380 billion hardware pivot becomes useless. It's an absurd market dynamic. Tech companies are spending hundreds of billions to force a feature onto phones that consumers actively rank at the bottom of their priority list, and which actively destroys the feature consumers rank at the top.
This exemplifies an industry building what it thinks people want, rather than what people actually need or prioritize.
And it's exacerbated by something called the Jevons paradox. It states that as technological progress increases the efficiency with which a resource is used, the rate of consumption of that resource rises due to increasing demand. Tech giants hope making AI cheaper and more efficient will make people use it constantly. But if consumers use edge AI constantly, the battery drain compounds exponentially. Efficiency gains in NPUs are immediately wiped out by the sheer volume of AI requests the software encourages.
So the more efficient the AI becomes, the more people use it, and the more battery it consumes, creating a never-ending cycle of drain.
That's the trap. There's also a slight generational divide to consider. While most consumers reject AI in favor of battery life, some younger consumers do find mobile AI features helpful. But here's the catch. These younger consumers are also the heaviest smartphone users, with the highest daily screen time. They're the demographic most likely to hit the battery wall first and experience the frustration of a dead device midday.
So they might be more enthusiastic, but they'll also be the first to suffer the consequences and potentially abandon the features.
This all brings the discussion to the fundamental problem that isn't going to be solved by next year's iPhone or the one after that: the physical limits of current battery technology.
What are those limits? Can't we just make batteries better? Improvements have been seen over the years.
That is true, but those improvements are starting to scrape against hard physical ceilings.
The theoretical energy density limit for lithium-ion batteries is being approached, with today's highest-end commercial batteries already operating close to that maximum.
So the industry is not far from the theoretical maximum. It cannot simply Moore's law its way out of chemistry, as the report puts it.
Exactly. You can't shrink atoms. Making the battery physically larger makes the phone too heavy and thick, and packing the cells tighter dramatically increases the risk of thermal runaway, essentially explosions. So we're running out of room to maneuver with existing chemistry.
This highlights a staggering misallocation of capital in the tech sector today. If battery tech is the bottleneck, why isn't more money going into solving that problem?
That's the trillion-dollar blind spot highlighted in the Cornerstone report. Venture capital and massive corporate capex are flowing almost exclusively into software models and data center infrastructure.
The $380 billion mentioned earlier going into cloud AI.
Precisely. Meanwhile, the physical bottleneck, energy storage, is being relatively ignored. In 2025, while big tech spent that $380 billion on AI infrastructure, venture capital funding for the entire energy storage sector was disproportionately small in comparison.
$5 billion versus almost $400 billion? That's not just a disparity, that's an abyss.
It is. The report issues a stark warning. Mainstream edge AI adoption will completely stall unless capital pivots to the intersection of AI and battery tech. We desperately need breakthroughs in next-gen solutions like solid-state batteries, which replace the liquid electrolyte with a solid, allowing for higher density and safety, or silicon anode technology, which can store more lithium ions than traditional graphite.
Various companies are working on these technologies, but they require massive investment to scale.
Absolutely. To scale manufacturing to the billions of units required by the smartphone market is an enormous undertaking. The journalistic verdict here is clear. The next massive wealth generation in tech isn't necessarily going to come from the company that builds a slightly smarter LLM. Software is becoming commoditized.
So where will it come from?
The true trillion-dollar breakthrough will come from the unglamorous hardware and chemistry companies that figure out how to power a trillion-parameter model on a 6-inch slab of glass without melting the device or killing the battery in 2 hours. There's also the environmental and regulatory angle here. If Edge AI forces users to charge their phones twice a day instead of once, the total lifespan of the phone's battery will be cut in half, from maybe 2 to 3 years down to 1 to 1.5 years.
That's effectively planned obsolescence, engineered by the very features being promoted.
Which could lead to massive consumer backlash, potential class action lawsuits similar to Apple's Batterygate over battery degradation, and a huge spike in e-waste. It's an environmental time bomb.
So it's not just a technical problem, it's a looming consumer and ecological crisis. That's quite the outlook.
That's the potential outcome if this trajectory continues unchecked.
So to pull all of this together, what are the key insights listeners should really walk away with about this push for Edge AI?
First, the current Edge AI narrative is not primarily about user privacy or speed, despite the marketing. It's fundamentally a multi-billion-dollar cost-shifting strategy by tech giants to offload their massive cloud AI infrastructure expenses, particularly electricity costs, onto consumers.
Second, the physics of current mobile hardware simply cannot support the promised capabilities. Generating even a modest amount of AI content on device can drain a significant portion of a phone's battery, leading to thermal throttling and ultimately unusable devices.
Third, there's a profound disconnect between what Silicon Valley is building and what consumers actually want. Battery life remains the top priority for smartphone users, while enthusiasm for on-device AI features is remarkably low. This sets up a scenario for widespread feature abandonment.
And finally, the underlying bottleneck isn't software, it's the chemistry of energy storage. Despite massive investments in AI software and cloud infrastructure, there's a critical lack of capital flowing into next-generation battery technologies needed to make sustained, powerful on-device AI feasible.
Essentially, the AI revolution, as it's currently conceived for mobile, is running on fumes.
This certainly appears to be the case. Until the chemistry of energy storage catches up to the mathematics of neural networks, Edge AI is looking like nothing more than a marketing slogan waiting to be killed by a low battery notification.
It begs the question, how long can this discrepancy between marketing hype and physical reality truly persist before consumers demand a course correction?
And will the industry ever truly prioritize what users want over what saves them money?
That's all for this episode of Tech Disruptions. Join us next time as we keep exploring the technologies reshaping our world. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Stay curious out there.